Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
Welcome, everybody, to Fantasy Football Tonight. I'm your host, Todd, the True Guru Farino, and I, of course, will be joined shortly by my co-host, RC Rizza, as we have, I think it's our fifth show of the season so far, and they've been all jam-packed and all, I guess, exciting and fun. I will get the chat room opened up right away for you guys out there in chat room land. I did forget about that. And, of course, if you do come into the chat room and you want to post a question, feel free to post said question, and we will answer it right away. As you know, we have always been the podcast for the listeners. If you're loyal enough to come in and listen to us live, nothing against the downloaders. But they can't ask us questions live, so that's the whole point. We get to your questions right away. And, of course, if you want to email us questions, you can email me at todd@fantasyfootballfetch.com. I have like a million email addresses. I think there's Todd at, fantasyfootballtonight.com also works. Might be Todd F. Whatever. Todd at fantasyfootballfetch definitely works.com. And we'll take your emails. And same thing with junkyardjake@yahoo.com. Big show planned for you. We're going to continue on the Pros vs. Joes draft, which I thought was a great draft to analyze last week. We did, I think, the first 4 rounds last week. It was a great draft to analyze because it's obviously, number one, because it's a combination of both, experts and then non-experts, but I'm sure guys who are very intelligent in fantasy football, but think differently than the experts would think. So that was a great draft to analyze. I think we left off at round 4, so we're going to try to get to that the rest of the time that we have in the show, and, of course, get on to some news. I mean, I'm just happy right now. I mean, what a perfect day it is that we're going to have female referees in games now, and Terrell Owens is back in the NFL. That makes me happy. I mean, listen, I just have one request for Roger Goodell. Can these female referees, can they be voluptuous? Can they, give a little cheerleader-esque look to them? This is football. This is a man's sport. I have no issue whatsoever with the female referee getting down in that game, pulling a flag out and calling something, but, can you make it entertaining for me? That's all I'm asking. You got cheerleaders along the sides, doing their thing, strutting their stuff. Let's at least ask for some voluptuality out of our. I'm messing referees. I mean, whatever goes on there. But of course, when RC comes in, I do want to discuss with him, the Terrell Owens impact in Seattle. I mean, I'm very happy that he got a job because, frankly, I wanted to be able to pay his child support. That's what's critical here. And I think that's the primary reason why he's playing. And I'm not even 100% sure that we're going to see much out of him, especially on that Seattle Seahawk, almost said Mariners, Seattle Seahawk team. But I'll tell you this, got to give the guy his guts and glory here. I mean, he did run a 40 and 4.5, which is for a 30. I think he's 38 now. 30? Yeah, I think he's 38. For a 38-year-old man, that's lightning fast. So you got to give him street cred that he's been able to keep up his speed. I do wonder what the whole point was of bringing Terrell Owens in. I mean, if you look at the receiving core that is there right now, they have like a million receivers. If you go through this, the list. I mean, obviously the receiver list is much longer right now, but they've signed Braylon Edwards. They've signed. They got guys, obviously, like old guys like Doug Baldwin and and Deion Butler, and then they just have just a slew. Of course, Ben, Obamanu, Sidney Rice, Golden Tate. One of RC's personal favorites when he's on the air with us right now. Golden Tate. RC, has Golden Tate lost his job? That's what I want to know from you right now.
To Terrell Owens, no. Not yet, and I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not sure Golden Tate's going to keep his job, but if he does lose it, it's probably going to be to Doug Baldwin, not Terrell Owens. But for now, tentatively, Sidney Rice is going to start the season on the shelf, and the plan is to see what Terrell Owens has left. And, like you were just mentioning, he very surprisingly ran under 4.4. I'm not sure what kind of clock they were using. He didn't run 4.4 when at his first combine back in 1994, so I'm not sure what the heck was going on with that. I wouldn't touch Terrell Owens. I don't know how you feel about it, but Golden Tate will. I think decided his own destiny. It's either going to be he's going to play up to his talent or he's just going to be unfocused. And that really was the problem with him last year. You know, he's a very talented receiver, but he just couldn't get on the same page as their offensive plan, and he's the one who really doomed himself. So it's really up to him, you know.
I mean, let me ask you this. I mean, has Seattle turned into, you know, and it's maybe it's a Pete Carroll thing, I don't know, but has Seattle turned into a graveyard for ex-pro, you know, all-pro receivers? Because if you look at who they got Antonio Bryant on their roster, and not Des Bryant, completely different player, just in case you were confused from Cowboy days. You know, they got Antonio Bryant on their team. They obviously still have the aging Mike Williams, but that's one of their original guys. They have Sidney Rice they brought over, Terrell Owens, Braylon Edwards. I mean, can you try to give me a figure of what they're trying to do in Seattle? I mean, are they just trying to, I mean, is this to put butts in the seats, or is this actual offensive value for, you know, for whomever their quarterback ends up being? My guess would be Matt Flynn.
Yeah, for now it looks like Matt Flynn, and we'll see how long that lasts. I don't know, because you know, last year obviously they had some problems. It's kind of interesting how last year Mike Williams seemed to be the obvious choice for Pete Carroll, and then, you know, of course this year I believe he was cut. You know, so I'm not sure. You know, with Pete Carroll, it's hard to figure out if he knows really what he wants. You know, so as far as the receivers there, I wouldn't count on any of those older guys. Antonio Bryant, you know, is pretty much done. Terrell Owens, even, I wouldn't expect too much out of him. He could surprise, though. You know, he's one of those guys where if he puts his mind to something, you know, I've always admired him as a player. Obviously, he's a bit of a loose cannon, but you know, you can't deny that when he feels like playing, he's going to. And you know, even though he's 38 years old. If anyone could make a comeback at that age, it's going to be Terrell Owens. But yeah, Pete Carroll is just schizophrenic. I mean, he's really like a Mike Shanahan type of coach, and you just have to, you know, one thing he did last year, which once again was a surprise. I mean, he stuck with Marshawn Lynch, you know, the whole year. No one really expected that to happen. This year, I think Matt Flynn is going to be on a bit of a short leash. I personally think Russell Wilson is, you know, what we talked about him a couple weeks ago. He's a little bit short in stature. That's one of the reasons why he dropped as far as he did in the draft. But he's an incredibly talented quarterback. He's probably, I think even at this point, a better option than Matt Flynn. So if you're expecting Matt Flynn to stick the whole year at quarterback, you know, we may not see that either. Yeah, Seattle is a tough team to figure out. Oh, and the running back situation, remember, you know, they brought in Robert Turbin this year, and with Marshawn Lynch being, you know, a little bit questionable, you know, due to, you know, off-season shenanigans and what have you, and plus, you know, he's once again not always been the most consistent performer. You know, you have to look out for Robert Turbin in the running back situation as well.
Oh, there's going to be a lot that needs to be decided in Seattle with this preseason, and I think anybody who gets stuck with a Seattle player outside of the possibility of, you know, of Marshawn Lynch, because he had such an effective year last year, there's going to be cause for concern. It's probably, I mean, I know it's Pete Carroll, and he has some tricks up his sleeve once in a while, even though he hasn't had great success in the NFL. But I would just say this is one of those teams I'm going to stay away from. You know, and I mean, like, for example, you know, I might be, I don't want to say anything yet about, you know, let's leave that surprise for next show. But, you know, if you're going to get into like a big money league, you know, those type of leagues, the last thing you want to do is say, you know what, I'm going to take a chance on Sidney Rice or Terrell Owens or Matt Flynn, and then it comes down to the question, well, if I'm not willing to take a chance on, you know, Zach Miller or anybody else in that offense, at least, you know, with a decent draft pick, do I then want to take a chance on Marshawn Lynch? And I don't even care where you get these guys. The question is, are they going to be able to produce? There's Terrell Owens going to be cut. Terrell Owens, excuse me, is going to be cut by week 6 because he's just not cutting it. No pun intended. So, That's my worry with a team like Seattle, and that's my same worry with Cleveland. Transition into news, hey, with Cleveland, and that's just another garbage team that has all sorts of issues. They're probably going to have. I mean, obviously the way they're looking and what they've announced, they're going to have a rookie quarterback, and now they're going to have a rookie running back. But we had all this talk last week about Trent Richardson, RC. So we're going to go right into the news, and the first news topic is Trent Richardson had an MRE on his surgically repaired knee. Now, if you weren't familiar, I'm sure you are, but for the listeners in podcast land and in the chat room, he had surgery, I believe, in early February on his knee, just to repair some, I think just repair some tendon there, meniscus, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And and he was ready to work out, but he's wearing a sleeve, and his knee is still sore, and it still swells up from the surgery. That's never good for a running back, particularly a rookie running back. And now he went to go, had an MRI on his knee after practice, and the end result is no announcement out of Cleveland except he's going to go see the specialist, Dr. Andrews, I believe his name is, who everybody sees. So now, RC, what is the deal with Trent Richardson? I mean, is he now officially off the block for a top draft pick, or do we do a wait-and-see type thing?
Well, yeah, and I think it's a little bit worse because I'm pretty sure he's going to have a second scope, and if that happens, then you can pretty much write off the rest of the preseason, and that will probably be a situation that lingers on into the regular season. So really, at this point, obviously he was looking good and very highly regarded in fantasy drafts up to now, and I still think he's it's not a serious knee procedure. It's basically to clean up some loose cartilage. So I mean, it's not anything like a strained ACL or MCL situation. So, but it is a scope. It is a form of surgery. So it's going to set him back probably about a whole month. And instead of drafting him at the end of the first round, I think now, you need to knock him down probably at least a round.
Oh, definitely. I mean, well, you know me. I mean, I wouldn't have taken him in the first round. So anybody who did take him in the first round in early drafts is probably feeling it. But not just. I mean, obviously, the decision I'm making is not based on his injury. That just assists it further. I'm going to do a wait and see thing since I don't plan on drafting anytime in the next 5 days. But I would say by mid next week, if we don't have a clear and concise answer to what is wrong with his knee, I would say Trent Richardson should drop even further than a round. I'm talking around 4 or 5, because this could be one of those problems, RC, that linger all year, kind of like a Beanie Wells type issue, where he's somewhat effective. You never know how good he's going to be, because you never know how well his knee is going to feel on any given Sunday. So I would be willing to say, I would steer clear, completely clear of Trent. Let somebody. I said this last week, RC. Let somebody else take that on. If he, like I said, if he runs for 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns, and you took Ryan Matthews instead of Trent Richardson, you did fine. Okay, you're going to be fine. Or you took, Megatron, CJ instead of. There's so many Johnsons out there. Calvin. There you go. I kept wanting to call him Charles Johnson. That was my bad. Calvin Johnson. I went with you see how I slickly did that, RC? Went with the nickname and then went with the initials?
Well, at least you didn't call him Charles Rogers. What was that the guy that they drafted? Was it like the number 2 pick or 1 pick? Remember years ago? It must have been about. Yeah, it was like one. Yeah, because they went through this period where they could not find a receiver in the draft. Basically, if they fell out of a space shuttle and landed in their stadium, and so Charles Rogers was essentially picked. And I remember he was probably one of the. I think he hurt his shoulder like the first game, first 5 minutes of the first game or something like that. But anyway.
Yeah, that was. I think he was right after. Was he right after Mike Williams? They did Mike Williams, then Charles Rogers, and then they did it again. I mean, they had 3 in a row there where they drafted 3 number 1, and they were like nuts. And everyone was. I forgot who the manager or the coach was then, but it's like, you're nuts.
Yeah.
Do you remember who the third guy was? Do you remember who the third wide receiver they took was?
Oh no, I forget. It'll come to us though. But anyway, as far as the rest of the Cleveland Brown situation, what do you think of Brandon Whedon? Because it looks like, this is a rookie. He's not really a rookie. He's 28 years old. He was did you know he actually groomed as a baseball player. He came up in the Yankees farm system, and took that as far as he could, and then decided to abandon that, and then went into football. And then fast forward to April's draft, and he was the first round pick of the Browns, and now he's sitting atop the depth chart, and it looks like he's going to be starting the first game for the Browns. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, what I think of, which most people know about what I feel about rookie quarterbacks is I don't get very excited. Okay, I know people are going to bring up Cam Newton all day, and they're going to bring up. I'm sure there's an oddball quarterback now and then that you could bring up that had a very good, if not amazing, rookie season, and you could do it. There's a couple you could bring up. But for the most part, RC, I don't have a lot of confidence in rookie quarterbacks, particularly rookie quarterbacks on what I consider to be a very bad team. It's not like Whedon's going to have a whole lot of weapons around him. For example, if you wanted to look, at the Cincinnati Bengals of last year, they came in, they brought in their rookie quarterback, Andy Dalton. They also brought in a rookie receiver, but they had tools built around. They had a decent running game. They had a solid tight end. They had solid wide receivers around him, particularly in his nice little rookie, and he worked out for him. He didn't have the greatest year. I mean, Andy Dalton didn't put up amazing numbers, but he had a pretty good year. So I guess what I'll ask you, RC, is what do you think we're going to get out of Deedon? Or do you think we're going to get out of him, a type of year that Andy Dalton gave us last year, which was about 3,400 yards and 20 touchdowns versus 13 picks? Or is he going to have a monster-type rookie season like Cam Newton had? Or is he going to be another Colt McCoy? You got three choices.
I'm actually cautiously optimistic about Whedon. I think he's I like Greg Little. I think Greg Little, given the handicaps he had last year with Colt McCoy, is not a good quarterback. I think he's got the requisite intelligence to play the game, but I just don't think he has the physical tools, and that pretty much showed up on the field. So, but despite that, Greg Little actually looked pretty good. He looks like a legitimate number one receiver. If he had Andy Dalton thrown to him last year, who knows? He might have had the same season as A.J. Green. So I think, that's a good start. And Muhammad Masakawi is what he is, big, slow. Evidently, he's looking pretty good this year, to start things off. He's locked in at the number 2 spot. They've got some interesting depth. I mean, they've got Josh Jordan, actually, who is, I believe, a supplemental draft pick. A little bit of a character case, but very talented. I mean, he's a guy who could surprise. Carlton Mitchell is another one of those guys who looks very talented, just never seems to get it together, but you never know when someone like that could, sneak into relevance. Josh Cribbs, I think, is pretty reliable. So it's not like their receiving core is that much of a mess. Not to mention Ben Watson at tight end isn't a bad option. They've got a couple of good guys actually backing him up, Jordan Cameron and Evan Moore. So I think he's not, it's a tough division, but I think he's got, certainly with age, you would think maturity goes along with that. One thing to really love about him is, even if he, doesn't turn out to be somebody who can pick up the game and the maturity theory falls through, one thing is for damn sure, this guy can throw. This guy throws frozen ropes wherever he needs to. He's not mobile. It's not. You gotta let him operate in the pocket. I mean, he's not a guy that's going to be scrambling around. But when he's in the pocket and he sets his feet, this guy can throw very well. So he's got that going for him. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, no, if he can form some kind of chemistry with Greg Little. I mean, obviously Greg Little is an outstanding wide receiver, and he's been able to make plays happen and put up some decent fantasy numbers, even with below average or just god awful quarterbacks. So getting Whedon now gives him an opportunity. Yeah, you're right. The guy can hit him. The guy can throw hard. The guy can throw far. He will have that option. It's just the question is, what can the Cleveland Browns, what are they going to try to accomplish this year? I mean, you're right. They're in a brutal defensive division. I mean, all three teams in that division have good defenses, if not great defenses, in the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Ravens. So they're going to have issues right there with 6 of the games they have to play all year. So the question is, how well will that running game be able to step up to help the passing game, and will he be able to adapt to the NFL game quickly? We'll definitely find out. We certainly will. My thing is that about the only player that I would like to have on my team out of everybody on that team is Greg Little, but I'm not going to take him very early. That's going to be a guy that I'm going to take a lot later, just because I'd rather have less risky players. But that's the way that goes. What else is going on in the news?
So basically, Rashard Mendenhall, it looks like, he's, as if we didn't know this, but it looks like it's pretty definite that he's going to miss, really, the estimation is the first 6 games of the season. And I think as far as the Pittsburgh running back situation, everyone is really expecting Isaac Redman. I noticed that he's been going actually pretty high in drafts. Looks like, he'll be drafted anywhere between as high as like the 5th round through the 8th round. I'm not really. I don't know how you feel about Redman. I think he's he's a big, tenacious running back. He doesn't really stick out in terms of like anyone who's going to bring anything dynamic to the running game. I mean, he's just a big, powerful running back. If that's the direction they want to go. It's completely different from Mendenhall, who at least. If you let him get away, he's the type of running back that'll be, gone. Redmond is not that guy. So I don't know why Redmond's being drafted so high, but certainly it looks like he's going to be the focal point of the running game for now. I still like. I don't know if you remember the guy they drafted a couple of years ago, Jonathan Dwyer.
Yeah.
Jonathan Dwyer was, he got really knocked down in the draft that year, and the reason why was because I think he, I heard reports he had some lingering injury from one of the bowl games, and when he ran at the combine, he ran like a 4.6, which you do that, and that's pretty much the death knell for your draft status. But he really isn't that slow, and I think, hearing reports out of Pittsburgh that, he's dropped a couple pounds and, he's looking good again. For me, Jonathan Dwyer is really a dark horse in the Pittsburgh backfield. And another thing to consider is that Mendenhall, I believe, this is the last year of his contract, and it'll be interesting to see if Pittsburgh even really tries to re-sign him. As we've noticed with the Mike Wallace situation, they're trying to resist against getting hooked onto these big lucrative contracts, and so Jonathan Dwyer is the guy to keep in mind. Actually, maybe for keeper leagues or even this year, the first couple of games we'll see what the rotation is, but I'm really not that high on Redmond. What do you think of him?
No, I never really was a big fan of Redmond last year when he came in. And even though he posted up pretty good numbers, he looks like the type of running back that's going to have issues, trying to, do 25 carries a game. And I don't think, and really when it comes down to it, I really don't think either of these guys are guys that are going to, if out of the two of them, certainly Dwyer is the guy who can handle the full load. But I can see them doing a committee thing here. And if somehow Pittsburgh stays away from the running back committee between Dwyer and Redmond, that if one of these guys sticks out, the question is going to become, and I really do agree with you on Jonathan Dwyer. I mean, he's a little bit smaller, running back, I would say in weight and in size than Redmond is. And I just think Redmond's just too big. I think Redmond's a great bruising running back. He's the kind of running back that can slam into the guy and get 3 or 4 yards. But asking him to do that 25 times a game is impossible. So now that brings up Jonathan Dwyer. If he can get a hold of that job by the start of the season, or at least by week 2, no later than that, and then run off 5 big games, and which really is not hard to be a good running back in the Pittsburgh system, you're going to have to question yourself on what they're going to do when Mendenhall comes back with his surgically repaired Achilles. What happens? Do you just throw him in there and just start running hard 25 times a game? No, you don't. You might be able to come back by week 6, but the question is, when will he take over that starting spot? Now we're talking about week 8 or 9 before he's in football shape to even take over that spot. And by then, if Jonathan Dwyer is the big guy on campus and taking all the reps and running well and scoring touchdowns, I don't see them removing him from that job. And you're right, Mendenhall's up next year. Mendenhall moves on. Dwyer and or Redmond take over, likely Dwyer. So I would definitely consider Dwyer a sleeper in this year's draft. And I know he's not, I'm sure he's going pretty high. I haven't looked at his ADP. I've looked at Redmond's ADP. But I would be, if I were out there, I would take a flyer on Jonathan Dwyer. I agree with you.
So it appears that Kenny Britt simply cannot stop being stupid. This is a guy who's obviously a very big conundrum for, going into drafts this year. Where do you draft him and what can you expect of him? Obviously if he's on the field, every time he's on the field, he does extremely well. He's obviously an impact receiver. But this guy is, I think he's been arrested like 8 times in his young NFL career. He's expecting a suspension. Estimations are between 2 and 6 games for this year. He kind of got off the hook last year because of the holdout and all that nonsense. And then recently there's reports that he posted a picture of his $10,000 fine for missing a rehab assignment. Certainly the team is not going to be happy with this. It'll be interesting to see if there's going to be any other punitive actions taken against Britt, but I'm not touching him this year. I just don't know what to expect, in terms of suspension. And this is a guy that, although he's just vastly talented, I just can't depend on him, to be on my fantasy team. The couple of games that he might play that he's going to play, when you put him in, he's going to make a difference, that's sure. But where do you draft someone like that?
Kenny Britt is one of those guys who, he has his own office at NFL headquarters. This is a guy, who has his own toilet stall probably. He's there all the time sitting in Goodell's office. And my take on Kenny Britt is that I have a list, and it's normally in my head, of players I simply do not want to touch. I had Kenny Britt on my team, I believe, 2 years ago, and that was the year where he caught like 3 touchdowns one game, and then I think he was out the rest of the year, or out for just a buttload of time, and became a worthless pick. And then, of course, last year, he starts off the season as one of the hottest wide receivers for the first 2 games, and then, of course, he's out for the rest of the year. So my take on Kenny Britt is this, is that you can take him. He's going to face some sort of suspension, so you're not going to have him the full season. Well, that's what we're used to with Kenny Britt. So then what you go into now with Kenny Britt is you say, is he really worth taking a chance on at all? You don't even know what his own team is going to do to him. The Titans have been known for benching good players. I know that was back more in the Jeff Fisher days, but hey, they've been known to do that. I would simply steer clear of him. He is on my steer clear list, which as throughout this preseason, I will fill that list up, and everybody in podcast land's heads, they can do it. And again, hey, you might draft Kenny Britt, and wow, he'll be spent for 2 games, but another 14 games, he'll catch 16 touchdowns and have 1,800 yards, and I'm going to look at that person drafted him and say, man, good job. You took a chance, man. Woo! Wipe that brow. The rest of the people out there, I'm saying no. Just, you know what? You could take somebody else who's not going to give you a heart attack every week. Right? Where I said, we're getting older, RC. We can't have those.
But so in Kenny Britt's office and Goodell's complex, I heard that they couldn't even trust him with the coloring books. they had to take away all Kenny Britt's coloring books. He kept on writing, cuss words and stuff, so he can't even be responsible with that. So.
Oh, behave. Yeah, baby.
Well, it's because he kept writing the F word on Roger Goodell's wall in crayon. and Roger's like, do I have to suspend you for this now? Come on, he's bored, RC. He's got a torn, whatever. What did he do last year? Break a leg, torn a ligament? I don't know. I can't remember what Kenny Britt. What did he do last year that injured himself?
He's had fairly frequent knee problems.
Knee?
Yeah, it was something to do with his knee, I believe.
All right, let's wrap up the news so we can get to the draft. So what else you got for me?
Another second-year receiver that's looking pretty good is Torrey Smith. He was a guy that started off pretty slow, but when he finally got a chance to play, and this is despite the Baltimore's really pass-adverse offense. I mean, I really think that Joe Flacco operating in a different offense would probably be a star by now, but it almost works to his detriment, to have to quarterback and I believe the offensive coordinator is Cam Cameron, and it's great for Ray Rice obviously, but for some reason, it really doesn't suit Flacco's skills. But despite that, when they finally gave him a deep threat receiver like Torrey Smith, and Torrey Smith finally started running the correct routes, that seemed to work very well. And it looks like Torrey Smith is continuing from his progress of last year. He's a guy that I believe you can get pretty late in drafts, like maybe the 7th, 8th round. So he's having a good off season. So someone to keep in mind. What do you think of him?
Torrey Smith is always an interesting character, especially from fantasy football stands. Because number one, he's on a team that doesn't pass really well. I mean, they have great receivers in that team. They have Aquan Bowl, not great, but very good receivers in him and Aquan Bowl, just to name a couple. I mean, I think last year they went with Derek. What's his last name? First, I'm blank on him. The veteran guy who just retired this year. I'm blanking on his name.
Me too. What receiver? Oh, yeah.
Mason, there you go.
Yeah.
So they go through all these fine receivers, but at the end of the season, all their receivers don't put up the numbers that are required, for fantasy. Sure, they put up decent numbers that are required to win football games, but that doesn't do you and I any good, RC. So what do I think of Torrey Smith? I got to look at the team around him. I have to look at and you're right, they have Cam Cameron in there, who's an offensive, he's definitely an offensive guru, and will certainly get the ball to him. The question is, can Joe Flacco do it? We've seen Joe Flacco have flashes of brilliance where, where I thought, wow, he's finally, he's like Romo, he's making Italians proud. But then he goes off and he doesn't have very good games, and then they end up making game plans that really go around him. So my thing is, this is, again, one of those teams where I would say, looking at, they got Aquan Bolden, Torrey Smith, Jacoby Jones, and then they have a slew of other guys that are just, mainly junk, players or rookies, we haven't seen much yet. This is a team that likes to run. This is a team that has Ed Dixon at tight end, and he's going to be the safety valve for Joe Flacco. The only people I would really pay much attention to on this team are, of course, Ray Rice and Ed Dixon. And I really wouldn't want, and if I'm forced to draft a Torrey Smith or an Aquan Bolden or Joe Flacco, I would be a little upset. But out of all three of those guys, yes, I think Torrey Smith is going to be the standout wide receiver this year for the Baltimore Ravens. So I agree with you on Smith, at least from that standpoint. But what that standout will be, who knows?
Yeah. Also on the Ravens, one guy to keep an eye on who's off to a little bit of a slow start. I think he pulled a hamstring, and he's the guy who was really favored to be the handcuff for Ray Rice, which is an important position. Bernard Pierce. He's a rookie this year. Pretty talented running back. Has bigger than Ray Rice. Has a pretty good burst. Good guy to run between the tackles. Really seems like a good compliment to Ray Rice. But I think at this point it doesn't look like he's catching on that quick, and he's being slowed by some some injury problems. Certainly not a guy to dismiss, but realize that if you were trying to target him higher, you could probably get him a little bit later in your draft because the reports out of Baltimore are not really that positive at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're going to take a guy number one, you better handcuff him. In a running back situation, I'm talking about. You can handcuff anybody else you want, but in a running back situation, normally those guys are number one because they're good running teams. Like Philadelphia is a good running team. And we have a question that we're going to do right now after this topic about the Philadelphia running game. But, I mean, Ray Rice is one you got to take. You got to look at the handcuffing with Ryan Matthews. You have to take a look at the handcuffing with Arian Foster. Obviously, that's one that, I mean, they have running backs galore. But in this case, certainly Bernard Pierce is a guy that, they're going to stick in there. They're going to give him that chance to be the handcuff for him. And, hopefully it'll work out for them. All right, well, I do have a question, not from the chat room. This is an email question. But right before I get to that, I want to make a little – I want to talk about the leagues. I forgot about talking about the leagues. I know you hate this part, RC, but I just wanted to inform everybody that we do have all 3 leagues filled up. And I apologize. I know I got a couple of people who emailed me, 2 or 3 that emailed me after the leagues filled up, and I haven't had a chance to get back with them. I do apologize, but if we did fill up all 3 leagues, we have 3 leagues, but there's one team I'm targeting, RC, out of all 3 leagues. He's in League 3, and this is Punch from a baseball league of ours, from our ball. He got in, and guess what he named his team? And when I target somebody, first of all, I make the schedule. So I'm going to make sure I hit him on my schedule. I'll hit him anyways. But do you realize that did you see what he named his team? Are you even on the same page as me right now? At all?
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to take your word for it.
I'm going to say this only because I have to. It has no bearing whatsoever on any fantasy analysis. I'm giving a disclaimer. He named his team Lee Evans Forever. Is that a shot at me? Is that?
Is that a shot at who?
At me.
Why you?
Because I banned his name from our show.
Oh, I thought you banned Eddie Royal's name.
No, he's next on the list. I'm allowing you to talk about Eddie Royal because I know you have a love affair with him. No, it's Lee Evans.
Oh, you've got a pretty sizable list of banned players. You gotta send me that list so I can annoy you and mention these guys.
Well, I'll tell you right now, Eddie Royal and Golden Tate top the list because we always bring them up. We give them airtime, and then they go out there and they get 1 catch for 8 yards. And I'm like, okay, why do we talk about Eddie Royal? All right, well, here's the question about LeSean McCoy brought to me. I think it was from David Bissett. He asked, he goes, should I still take, basically, I don't have that question in front of me, so I'm losing it, but he basically asked, should I still take, is LeSean McCoy still a number 1 draft pick, with the Eagles talking about giving him rest and mixing up especially with one of their, some of their young running backs, particularly Dion Lewis? That was his question. He still wants to know, should I take him? Because right now I think he's going ADP 2nd or 3rd. So RC, we all know about Dion Lewis. I believe he's a 5th-round pick from 2011. He's currently on the depth chart as the number 2 running back. He's looking fine so far in preseason play, or not preseason play, but training camp play. Does this devalue? I mean, this guy, he's got the new contract. He signed his 5-year, $40-something million deal that he got. What's your take? I mean,
I don't think so at all. I don't think he's going to, it's going to be hard to really top what he did last year. Last year was really his, I think his real legitimate breakout year. So don't expect that. But as far as like draft picks in the top 5, I think McCoy is still as safe a pick as you can make. When you look at the guys behind him, Dion Lewis, they don't have a lot of faith in him. He's small. He doesn't come close to the talent level of LeSean McCoy. Bryce Brown is a different type of running back. Philadelphia has always had these guys back there, and they never really, it's just not part of their game plan to kind of like, I think, have a real legitimate platoon situation. you would think in prior years, I remember as a matter of fact, a lot of these guys they've cut. I'm forgetting the guy. They had a couple of years ago. He was supposed to be like the perfect change of pace back, and big bruiser, and before you know it, he was gone. But these guys behind him, Chris Polk is another guy in there. He was undrafted. This is a guy who at the time of the draft was really expected to go at least to the third round, and for some reason he dropped all the way out of the draft. The Eagles picked him up to put him in there too with Bryce Brown and Dion Lewis. These guys are in no way a threat to LaShawn McCoy. If you have a top 3 pick and you're targeting McCoy, I would continue to do so.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think it's borderline silly, the question, and I only say that because I personally have a love affair with LaShawn McCoy, and everybody knows that. So for years. And I would never not draft LaShawn McCoy. He's the only running back that I really like. Well, I like Ray Rice a lot too. Out of those top running backs, those are the 2 guys I really like a lot because, and you obviously know why, because I play in all PPR leagues. I mean, I don't even know if non-PPR leagues still exist. I'm sure in some dark corner of Montana and in some barn somewhere, people are drafting. No, we don't like receptions. I always do, and LaShawn McCoy is good for 60 of them plus every year. And no matter how much they rest him, the bottom line is Andy Reid is going to have his top players in there at all times, unless the game is an absolute blowout. So he's always going to be in there. And sure, he'll get rested by Dion Lewis. Now, is Dion Lewis a good handcuff? Yes, he is. LaShawn McCoy's been a guy who gets beat up a little bit, might go down for a game or 2 this year. Pick up Dion Lewis. You'll get a surprise game out of you. He'll be the Deuce Staley of 2012. That's what he'll be. He'll have a great year. He'll come in. He'll do well, and he'll be the guy. Assuming he is.
Yeah, I would be careful with that. I don't think, and he's another guy that if you want to take, in the event that you pick McCoy and you need somebody as insurance, Dion Lewis makes an awful lot of sense. But don't reach for him because, I think that if, in the adverse circumstance where McCoy got hurt, Dion Lewis could not replace him. It would have to be a combination of Bryce Brown and Dion Lewis, or Chris Polk and Dion Lewis. So don't put too much weight on him. Take McCoy like you planned and hope for the best. One thing I think you can expect not to happen is for him to score 17 touchdowns on the ground again. That to me is where he's going to drop off. He's great because of the Eagles' offense. He's very involved in the passing game. Not kind of strangely not as involved last year as he was the year before, but that's subject to change too. Last year he got actually about 70 more carries, got 30 less passes, but that can change back the other way. The one thing I wouldn't expect though is 17 touchdowns on the ground, but even if he gets 10, he's still a top 3 pick.
Oh, absolutely, and I don't expect him to get 17 either again. I mean, that was like when LaDainian Tomlinson got like 25. I mean, or whatever it was he got. I think 28 or whatever the insane number was. I mean, if anybody really expected that again the next year, and same thing with Chris Johnson when he broke 2,000 yards. If you really expected that the next year, you're crazy. It's just not going to happen. It just doesn't work out that way. Maybe if you're back in the Marshall Faulk days, maybe. But we're not in those days anymore. So I agree with you. And you're right. Absolutely do not forget about Chris Polk because this backup job is not decided. They have a slew of running backs they're looking at, and certainly Chris Polk and Dion Lewis are the 2 leaders for that. All right, let's go. We do have a question in the chat room really quickly. Let's get to it. It's from PPS. He might have a second question, too. He asked, do you think the Saints will be the same as they have been the past few years without their coach? And he goes, I'm thinking that Breeze will be fine, but what about the rest of the team? Now, we have discussed the Saints a little bit over the last couple of shows, but we really haven't tackled too much of the coaching situation here, RC. My feeling is going to be simply this. I don't really care who the coach is. I mean, I think they know their game plan. They had the same coach several years. They know what they have a playbook, and Drew Brees really runs that offense. So the question is going to come down to, can the defense perform? But do you see any problem with the offense being ran by Drew Brees? I mean, he looked pretty sharp in the small sampling we got from him last Thursday. So what do you feel about that?
Well, it's with Drew Brees. Drew Brees is like a coach at this point in his career, so there's not too much to worry about him. If you're going to target Drew Brees, even given I think the uncertainty surrounding that team this year, most of it I think is directed at the defense. Obviously, that's where the unfortunate transgressions occurred. That's where basically they're going to have a different scheme probably altogether. They've lost a couple of key players who've been suspended, so their defense is going to suffer more than the offense. And because of the defense probably dropping off, that actually will benefit the offense because they'll have to maybe be in situations where they give up more points than they normally would. So from a fantasy vantage point, that could actually benefit Drew Brees. So the one thing that I would stay away from all the running backs except maybe Darren Sproles. You just have no idea who's going to really be the feature guy. Darren Sproles, I think, has a clear role because he fits in so well with the passing game. Drew Brees, I think, is very safe, maybe a little bit underrated at this point, fantasy-wise. And Jimmy Graham is going to be a stud, and I think he's being a little bit overrated. I wouldn't take him in the first round, but that's where he's going. If you see him drop to like the later section of the second round, and you really want to take him, I think he's a great pick. Colston should do very well if he can stay away from injuries. So, yeah, there's nothing to worry about with Drew Brees, Jimmy Graham, Darren Sproles you can get later in your draft, and those are really the three key guys, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, I think their offense is going to be fine. And you mentioned that the key guys, their running game might be a little bit of a mess. And I think they have Spagnuolo as their, if I'm saying his last name right, I should be, it's Italian last name, as their defensive coordinator. I mean, the Saints have never had really a great defense. They normally depend on high-scoring offense to pressure the other team's offense to score. So, and then they make things happen. I'm not really too concerned. I wouldn't expect the Saints to have a 12-4 record. I mean, I think they'll be lucky if they can go 10-6 this year. But with Drew Brees at the helm, they're going to be pretty successful. Another question they have. He goes, okay, we've got two questions here. He goes, what are your thoughts in Denver on Manning and his receivers? How do you think they will do this year? Is there any one wide receiver or tight end to own? Now, again, this is another guy that we discussed a little bit, I think week one. We didn't go too much into him the last couple weeks. Now, we know he brought over Jacob Tamey. He has Thomas there. They have Eric Decker there. They've signed some oldie but goodies there as well, like Andre Caldwell, and they brought back in, I think they've always had, Brandon Stokely there, who is an ex-Manning target. Out of those guys, and of course let's not forget about Joel Dreesen, technically the backup tight end, but still not a bad receiver. Out of all their crew that they have there, RC, who do you think is going to stand out for Peyton Manning?
I think, obviously, the one thing to be concerned about is you want to make sure that Peyton Manning, even if Peyton Manning is at 85%, I mean, that's still pretty damn good. He's going to make the entire passing game better. The one thing about Denver, though, John Fox does prefer running, but despite that fact that, when they do pass and with a healthy Peyton Manning, Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker look to be the key guys. They definitely you have to definitely, I think, reach for them a little bit higher in the draft than maybe if you really want them, like especially Decker. Although I've seen Demaryius Thomas go very high too. You really need to take them higher. Personally, I would rather have Decker. Demaryius Thomas, I think, is more talented. He's big and fast. I don't think we've really seen enough of him on a consistent basis to know what to expect. Eric Decker, I think, definitely seen more discipline last year. This year, there's big things expected from him. He's looking good in the preseason. So Decker to me is probably the safer of the two. I think adding Caldwell was a great move. I've always liked him. He's going to play like the Austin Collie role, in the slot, and I don't think he's as good as Austin Collie at like being an intelligent route runner, but he certainly has more speed, and he could be actually a big play guy. So he's a guy that to maybe consider later in your draft. Tammy was a great acquisition. I think he's definitely not being ignored in drafts. I mean, but he is a good value tight end that you can get probably in the later rounds. Maybe 14th, 15th round. So the key thing here is to look out for how Peyton Manning is really doing. Certainly the guy, they've got nothing backing him up. So if Manning, for some reason can't play after week 6, forget about the Denver passing game. It's going to be pretty much all run. It's going to be, basically Willis McGahee and very little else. So that's the one thing to really keep an eye on. And that, that is a big risk.
No, it is. I mean, and we so far, so good. I mean, we haven't seen a great deal of Peyton Manning so far, but I mean, at least he's shooting up. That's the positive at this point. I like Eric Decker. I think he is going to be the standout. Demaryius Thomas, to me, he's kind of a trouble guy. He's kind of an ego player that, and that's not what Peyton Manning works well with. Peyton Manning works well with guys who work on timing, who run good routes. I'm not saying that Demaryius Thomas isn't going to be capable of that. He certainly has a talent to be one of the better receivers in the league. The question is, will he be able to keep up with Peyton Manning, the play calling, the play switching? I like Eric Decker. He seems to be, he kind of fits that mold of that Wes Welker, even though he'll be an outside wide receiver. He kind of fits that mold where he can move around and play in the slot and play in the outside on the wide receiver end. And he seems to be a guy who runs great routes. I mean, he made Tim Tebow look good in a lot of those dramatic comeback wins that Tim Tebow had. So I like Eric Decker a lot. He's a guy who sticks out, and I think he'll make a great sleeper pick, especially if Peyton Manning will in fact play. All right, so now Primetime has a question. Oh, go ahead.
Wait, one more thing on this, though. The interesting thing, if everything falls into place and Peyton Manning does have, something left in the tank and he avoids injury, the interesting thing this year is that Manning, for pretty much his entire career, has never had receivers like Thomas and Decker to work with. If you think back, like most of his career, he worked with Marvin Harrison, who was awesome, Reggie Wayne, who was awesome. But when you look at both those receivers, they were not really speed guys, and they were shorter. They were both around 5'10", 5'11". Demaryius Thomas, if he actually plays to his potential, is maybe the most talented receiver that Manning has ever played with. So, if Thomas, right now he's slowed by an Achilles thing, so something to keep an eye on. But Thomas is 6'3", fast, tough receiver, can catch in traffic. Decker, shifty, but also a taller guy too. So it'll be interesting to see if everything falls in place and these guys stay healthy. This could be a very prolific passing game.
It very well could be, and like I said, we'll definitely see if Demaryius Thomas can stay with the play calling and like the route running that and that just that discipline that is required in the Peyton Manning passing offense. All right, we got about 7 minutes after the show. We have a question about DeMarco Murray, and basically Primetime's asking, is he worth a number 1 draft pick? I mean, right now his ADP is putting him at around the 10th, 11th pick, 10.54 to be exact, according to our friends over at mockdraftcentral.com. So here's my take on him. First of all, he's from Las Vegas. He does the DeMarco Murray show, I think, every Wednesday. He calls into a show here locally and talks about what's going on, I guess, in DeMarco's life as a Dallas Cowboy. As you all know, he came out, basically got about 900 yards. If I'm not mistaken, he did that in he played in 13 games, but he really didn't play in 13 games. But he put up huge numbers. And if you see, he's a big running back, straight up and down guy, charges at you. What is that? Why is that a concern for me? is that any running back who runs in the style of DeMarco Murray leaves themselves susceptible to injury. You know, they don't do a lot of running to the side. They're straight up and down running backs, big guys. And, of course, what happened last year, he ended up just getting unlucky and, you know, fracturing his ankle. He's 100% healthy this year. But, RC, he had injury issues at Oklahoma as well. So the question now becomes, how risky of a pick is he? And I'm going to tell you this right now. This is my take on DeMarco Murray. No matter what, he's going to be a risk. But the reward against that risk, to me, is far superior than it is for other running backs, and especially when you can get him at the end of the first round and you don't have to pay for him at the beginning. If you can get DeMarco Murray with the 11th pick, turn around with the 13th pick, and pick another good running back to kind of supplement him in case he gets hurt, or just at least get 2 solid picks in a row rather than taking, you know, risk with an Arian Foster overall number 1, and then, you know, shooting yourself in the foot because you don't get another pick for 24, and then Arian Foster gets injured now for the year, and all hell breaks loose. So I really like DeMarco Murray. I mean, not because he's a Dallas Cowboy, not because he's from Las Vegas, Nevada, and not because he went down here to you know, a high school that I should have gone to. No, because he's that good, and he's in an offense that's going to use him in the right way, and this guy has the capabilities of putting up 1,600 yards and about 12 touchdowns. What's your take on Murray?
No, I agree, and I'm actually seeing him going most likely in like pretty much the middle of the second round, and I think that's a perfect place, you know, in terms of the risk reward. As far as talent, you know, there's not a lot to not like. You know, basically this guy, you know, he has good size. He reminds me actually of a guy we were talking about before, LaShawn McCoy. A little bit more prone to injury so far, but you know, I think the sample is not large enough to make a conclusion that, you know, he's one of those habitually injured guys. But very quick through the hole. He runs as effective inside as he does outside. He's a dangerous receiver. You know, really everything you want in a running back. I think he's going in the right spot. I mean, if you can get him in the middle of the second round, if that's where you're picking, because if you're picking in the middle of the second round, you're picking in the middle of the first, so you could hypothetically come away with Ryan Matthews and Murray, or Calvin Johnson and Murray, and you know, if you come away with, like, you know, a pair like that, you're in pretty good shape.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's what it's all about. I mean, it's really, you know, this is where it comes down to, you know, you have to draft, you know, to your pick. And I'm telling you right now, if I'm coming up and I have the 12th pick in the draft, and I have so many drafts here, I'm bound to get an 11th and 12th pick. And if I come down and I'm staring down the barrel of the guys that are available at that time, and if you really look at them, you know, it's not exactly, you know, it's not exactly awesome when it comes to some of these guys you get to choose from. I mean, obviously you're going to have a Drew Brees out there. You got Trent Richardson hanging around. You got, you know, maybe you have Darren McFadden, Marshawn Lynch, Adrian Peterson, Tom Brady. You know, even Matt Forte later. I'm looking at all those guys and I'm saying all of those guys except for Brees and really Brady. I mean, let's leave the quarterbacks out of it. Really are all have a major risk to them. Adrian Peterson's coming into the season injured. You know, who knows if he'll even, you know, start the season or be out for a couple of weeks. That's all something you got to consider. But then you have DeMarco Murray sitting there, who his only bad thing about him on his rap sheet is that he had a fractured ankle last year, and, you know, just when somebody came down his ankle. It wasn't like he pulled up a hamstring. It wasn't like he got injured in practice. It wasn't something like that. It wasn't a freak injury. Just, you know, hey, came down funny, bam, his ankle was broken out for the season. I think he's a great pick to pick right there, and then turn around and get Drew Brees. And then walk out of that draft with DeMarco Murray and Drew Brees. You tell me that's not good, RC.
No, yeah, that would be awesome. I think he'd be in great shape.
Well, that's what I would like to think. Well, we didn't get a chance to get to the rest of the draft, but the good thing about next week's show is I don't think I have any drafts on tap for next week. So we'll be able to go back and start on round 5. We had so many questions and such good news. When is our draft starting? When is the big Drunken Pirate Fantasy League's draft starting?
We're going to get that started. I'm going to invite everyone back by Friday or Saturday, and we'll get that started early next week.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about? I think we got about 30 seconds left in the show. Is there anything we missed in this week's show?
Oh, just quickly, Arizona quarterback situation. Don't dismiss John Skelton yet because Kevin Kolb, looks very much like last year, where I think he's had some injury problems, and so don't count Skelton out. James Starks looks terrible, just like we saw him last year. I think you start looking at Alex Green, because he could be a dark horse to get a legitimate playing time in Green Bay.
I want to ask you about, going back. That was a great thing you brought up, because I had that discussion with a fellow at my at the quote unquote real job, who's a huge Arizona fan and just totally disappointed in Kevin Kolb and John Skelton. And, he's not even wanting him to be the option. I think most people in Arizona are hoping that they'll sign somebody like say Matt Moore gets cut. Because he doesn't end up getting a starting job, and then they maybe they pick up a Matt Moore and ride with him for a little while. That's what I'm hearing out of Arizona land. But on to that running back situation, we got Ryan Williams back. Now, I remember he went out last year in the preseason. You were a huge Ryan Williams fan. I was a semi-big Ryan Williams fan last year. What's your feelings about him this year, coming off the season-ending injury last year?
Obviously that's a concern, but is he in any worse shape than Beanie Wells? Beanie Wells has basically been injured, every week that he's been in the league. You have to, wake up early to see the injury report to see what's going on with him. So, with Wells, I really like him, but he's just got that very problematic knee, and I really think if Ryan Williams is at full health or near it, that's going to be like maybe a 60-40 timeshare over there. So Williams is looking pretty good if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I think that's one of those picks that a lot of people are going to ignore. They're going to forget who he was in a lot of the drafts. They're going to overlook him because he's not going to have stats from last year. And I think you can get him at a very good value. I don't quite know his ADP right now. It doesn't really matter to me. The bottom line is I would have him on my team if I can get him probably around the same place he was going last year, which I know was fairly later in the draft, later rounds. But anyways, next week's show, RC, we will discuss not only your draft, but I always like to cover those. Everybody knows you get solid players the first 4 to 5 rounds, but it's really rounds like 6 through 10 where you can make the bulk of your team, where you have to make the very good picks, the excellent picks that are going to lead your team to the championship. Because everyone's going to get a good player the first 5 rounds. Whether or not that player pans out is another question, but everybody's going to get good players. You're going to get your Victor Cruzes, your Aaron Rodgers, your Trent Richardsons. You're going to get those guys. But round 6 through 10, totally different situation. We're going to discuss those rounds and and see what the pros versus Joes draft did, and we'll go from there.
All right, sounds good.
All right, I will catch you later, and everybody, thank you for listening, as always.
Blog Talk Radio, where millions of hosts and listeners gather.